Pilots are always lost, and there's a long history of that. And how you get from one point to another is always an interesting challenge. Even those of us who have played video games where we've flown airplanes, we get lost as well. So navigation has been a persistent problem from the beginning. Early on, it was very rudimentary. You would try to set a compass heading and get to where you were going, but if you got lost, which was often the case, you would look for a highway, look for a railroad, and follow it to the nearest town. And one of the things that happened in the United States was that they tended to paint on the roof of all of the railroad stations in these towns the name of the town. So when the pilot flew overhead, saw the name, they knew where they were. That's changed over time. We've become much less dependent on maps and those sort of rudimentary navigational systems. We now have a whole variety of others, and GPS is the central one today. It will take us from point A to point B anywhere in the world. Well, there's lots of stories in aviation history and space history that are great fun. And some of them relate to a whole variety of things. I mean, I've always been fascinated by how the rise of aviation is caught up in sort of the social milieu of the time. And so the Wright brothers were very much a product of their own time and their age. The excitement of flight in the aftermath of the Wrights successfully demonstrating an airplane is very much a ragtime sort of experience in the first decade of the 20th century. The air shows, beginning in the latter part of the 1900s, were these extravaganzas with people going from city to city and demonstrating the capabilities that they had, see how high they could get, how fast they could fly. Could they do acrobatics? All of these sorts of activities are a part of the sort of social makeup of this. And it's about air-mindedness and how it arose in the first part of the 20th century. We can see this in the way in which people become celebrities. And we're all familiar with Amelia Earhart and Charles Lindbergh, who in the 1920s and 30s were very important. But before that, there was people like Catherine Stinson, who was a tiny woman. She weighed less than 100 pounds, who began to fly in 1909, 1910. She travels around the world. She goes to Japan, and she becomes a great celebrity there. All of this is a part of this early milieu and this excitement and this romance with aviation. Flying higher, flying farther, and flying faster has been a mantra from the very beginning of the Wright brothers right up to the present. Can we build an airplane that can go above the clouds, can go into the stratosphere perhaps? Can we build an airplane that can fly halfway around the world so that we can essentially reach any destination without having to stop, land, and refuel? Can we build a vehicle that can fly so fast we can set records, that we can go coast to coast in the United States in under an hour? All of these are great challenges, and they have motivated lots of people to design airplanes that are able to do some of these activities. And it's exciting to watch. So when Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in 1927, that was a big deal. He didn't fly very high. In some cases, he was 30 feet off the deck. But he flew a long way, and he flew by himself. And that was pretty significant in 1927. When Chuck Yeager flew the X-1 faster than the speed of sound in 1947, that was a big deal. And it signaled a new age of supersonic flight, especially for combat. Getting to the scene fast, if you're in a fighter jet, is a really important activity. The ability to fly high gets you above the atmosphere, or much of the atmosphere, above the clouds, a lot of the turbulence that you see. If you're bumping along at 10,000 feet in the middle of the clouds, it's not a very pleasant experience. And if you're above that, it's a much smoother ride. So we all like that. All of that is a part of what we've tried to accomplish in flight in the 20th century, and we've been remarkably successful. The interesting thing about it is, once we get so fast and so high, we somehow think we're invincible, and that's not really the case. The U-2 spy plane, which could fly very, very high and very, very fast, was still a vehicle that could be shot down by the Soviet Union in 1960. The SR-71, which could fly even higher and faster, was never shot down, but nonetheless could still be attacked if were a desire to do so. All of this suggests, however, that one element, and we sort of see things come full circle in the latter part of the 20th century with stealth technology. Can you elude radar? Can you be more or less invisible to radar? Well, the interesting challenge about that is it's no longer about flying high and fast. It's about going low and slow. And if you go low and slow, you're less susceptible to creating a radar image. And that has been one of the dynamic aspects of modern flight. All of those are fascinating. There's one other piece of this that I think is important. Higher, farther, faster is useful at some level, but in the last 2 to 3 decades of the 20th century, there's really been an effort about smarter. And it's mostly about the digital electronic era, as we have built all kinds of capabilities that didn't exist previously. And we've become more efficient with our vehicles. We've become more expansive with what they can do. And fundamentally, it's about this new technology that we have employed in flight. One of the things that's happening in the commercial industry is that we are building aircraft that are more efficient than ever before. And we see this throughout the history of flight. There's no question about that. Anybody who got aboard a Ford Trimotor in the 1920s, sometimes known as Old Shaky, could fly. It was an airline carrier, but it wasn't very pleasant. And the DC-3 was really a major step forward in terms of luxury. When you could pressurize cabins and go higher and faster after that, that was a major accomplishment. When you could put a lot more people aboard with wide-body aircraft, especially the 747 in the latter part of the 1960s and into the 1970s, it's a really important set of changes. We've seen this right up to the present. The wide-body aircraft are some of the most luxurious and pleasant to fly in that have ever been built. And modern versions of these are elegant in ways that we've never thought of before, where I can sit there with my laptop or my television screen and watch movies as I cross to Europe or go to Japan or wherever it happens to be. And it's pretty much a fun experience in terms of flying in those vehicles. So we're seeing this over and over and over again. The latest edition of these massive airliners is the Airbus 380, which is a double-decker airplane that can handle 200 plus passengers. All of those are major changes, and we've seen that because of the advance of technology.